Meryl Streep stood up from her chair. Not to take a bow, not to acknowledge the applause still hanging in the room from a moment before. Midway through her sentence, she simply stood. 300 people in Studio 6B watched her push back from the desk, rise to her full height, and walk 3 slow steps away from Jimmy Fallon without a single word. Jimmy sat there, hand still raised mid-gesture, index card still open in his lap, and for a moment, no one behind the cameras made a single decision. It was a Tuesday night in November. The show had been running beautifully. Nothing about what happened next was ever supposed to happen at all. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon had welcomed Meryl Streep before. Briefly, professionally. The way legends are welcomed when their publicists have exactly 17 minutes to give you. But this November was different. She had come to talk about her return to stage work after years away from live theater, and the audience that night skewed older than a typical Tuesday crowd. These were people who had driven from New Jersey and Connecticut and Long Island specifically because she was there. They knew every film. They knew every Oscar speech. A few of them had been watching her work for decades, since before the rest of the world caught up. When she walked out in that dark blazer, the room gave her a standing ovation before she had said a single word. The segment producer later told a colleague she had worked in television for 19 years and had never felt a room go that quiet that fast. The particular silence that only arrives when people sense something is about to matter. Everything was prepared. Everything was exactly as it should have been. Halfway through the second segment, an assistant producer stepped quietly into the stage wing and handed Jimmy a small portable speaker, pre-loaded and ready. Jimmy set it carefully on the desk between them and leaned forward. He said he wanted to play her something, not a clip from a film, not a prepared bit or a produced segment. Just a sound, not polished, not performed, not theatrical. Just a voice, a young voice, mid-sentence, caught on a reel-to-reel recorder somewhere in the autumn of 1968. Meryl Streep looked at the speaker the way you look at something you recognize, but cannot yet place. The way memory reaches before language does. The way the body understands before the mind arrives. Jimmy pressed play. The sound that came through was barely audible at first. A woman rehearsing a monologue alone in a room, stopping, starting again, breathing through the silences the way actors breathe when they are working on something genuinely real. And then Meryl Streep's hands went completely still. Her chin dropped slightly forward. Her right hand rose slowly toward her collarbone. Jimmy watched her face change in a way that had nothing to do with television. He set his index cards face down on the desk. He said nothing for a breath. Then quietly, barely into his microphone, "Meryl? You okay?" The entire studio froze. The cameras kept rolling, but no one behind them made a decision. For a moment, the wrong assumptions moved through that room the way they always do. Had something happened to her? Was she unwell? She was 74 years old, and had just heard something that none of the 300 people in that building had any context for. 300 people held their breath. She did not answer Jimmy's question. She did not look at the audience. She looked only at the speaker, still playing, the young voice still filling the air between the desk and the first row, her voice barely above a whisper, but caught perfectly by her microphone. She said one word, one name, Eleanor. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1968. Meryl Streep wasn't always Meryl Streep, 3-time Oscar winner and the most honored actress in the history of American film. In October of 1968, in a small rehearsal hall on the 3rd floor of a building in New Haven, Connecticut, there was a 19-year-old theater student named Mary Louise Streep. who had not yet fully decided whether she was brave enough to do this for real. She was enrolled at Vassar College, studying drama with the kind of terrifying seriousness that young people bring to things before the world has a chance to make them sensible. The rehearsal hall held maybe 60 folding chairs. It smelled like old wood and steam radiators. She still remembers the floors were always cold. Eleanor Hartley had been teaching high school drama in New Haven for 11 years by that autumn. She was 41, which felt ancient to a 19-year-old, and she had made the drive to this student showcase because she believed without embarrassment that live theater was the only art form that could not be faked. She came alone. Her colleagues did not understand why she still did this on Tuesday evenings when she had papers to grade and a husband who looked up from the kitchen table and asked where she was going. She came alone because she could not explain it to anyone and had stopped trying years before. The young woman on stage that night did something Eleanor had not seen in 11 years of watching young actors. She stopped performing. Midway through a Chekhov monologue, a quiet, demanding piece that punished anyone who pushed too hard against it, the girl stopped performing and simply existed inside the words. Eleanor sat very still. Afterward, when the showcase ended and the other audience members filed out into the cold, Eleanor stayed. She waited until the girl had come down from the stage. She asked if she could speak with her for a moment. They talked for nearly 2 hours in the empty hall. About what Chekhov was asking for when he asked for stillness. About what it meant to be inside an emotion instead of demonstrating it. Eleanor had a small reel-to-reel recorder with her that night. She used it to capture student rehearsals for feedback, and at some point in the conversation, without either of them noticing, it was still running. She wrote her telephone number on the back of a program before they left. She told the girl, "Call me if you ever need someone to tell you that you are not imagining it." They spoke twice more that winter. By spring, Mary Louise had applied to Yale School of Drama. By 1975, she had her degree. By 1979, the world knew her name, and the name felt like it had always been there. Eleanor Hartley kept teaching high school drama in New Haven for 32 more years. She never told anyone about the conversation. She kept the recording in a wooden box on her desk at home, labeled only with a date and the word October. Her students remembered her as the teacher who listened the way no one else did. She retired in 2003. Her husband passed in 2011. She moved to a smaller apartment near the shore and read plays in the evenings and did not speak about the box. 3 months ago, her daughter Caitlin called the Tonight Show's production office. She said her mother had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, the doctors said. Maybe less. There was one thing Eleanor had asked her to do. She had kept a recording for 55 years. She wanted it played somewhere real, not sent online, not mailed in an envelope, somewhere real, where it would be received the way she had always meant it. She wanted the person on that recording to know that the conversation had mattered, that she had thought about it for 55 years, that she still believed what she had said that night in October. You are not imagining it. The Tonight Show reached Meryl Streep's management within 24 hours. Meryl Streep called Caitlin herself the following morning. She said, "Tell your mother I want her to feel like a person, not a moment. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." Behind the scenes, Meryl Streep had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. She had told the bookers she would allow the recording to be played on air only if Eleanor Hartley was somewhere inside the building when it happened. She had not told Jimmy. She had not told the audience. She had not told anyone except the segment producer who needed to know. Caitlin Hartley had driven her mother up from New Haven that morning, arriving at the studio 4 hours before showtime. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. The recording finished. The portable speaker went quiet. Jimmy sat forward slowly and looked at his cards, then looked up at her, standing there, still, 3 steps from her chair, one hand at her collarbone. The room had not exhaled. And then Jimmy, slowly, the way a man moves when he has just understood something he was not prepared to understand, reached beneath the desk and lifted a small white note card. He read from it in a quiet voice. He said there was someone who had made the drive up from New Haven early that morning. He said she was sitting in the 4th row, Section D. And the entire studio turned. In Section D, a woman with white hair and very still hands was already crying. Meryl Streep saw her before she fully stood. She took 1 step and stopped. The way you stop when the thing you are walking toward becomes suddenly more real than the distance between you. Then she walked down from the stage, not the stairs at the side, but directly off the front of the stage and into the aisle. And the audience understood what was happening the way audiences understand things, when there is nothing left to explain. They went completely silent. Eleanor Hartley was sitting upright in her seat. She was 76 years old, and she was small, the way people become small at the end of long illness, and she had both hands clasped together in her lap, and she was watching Meryl Streep walk toward her with an expression that was not surprise. It was recognition. The recognition of someone who had waited a very long time and was no longer surprised that the wait was over. Meryl Streep knelt down in the aisle beside her seat. She took both of Eleanor's hands in hers. "You still have cold hands," Eleanor said. Meryl Streep laughed once, sharp and wet and entirely real. "I didn't know you remembered that." "I remembered everything," Eleanor said. "I had 55 years to remember it." "Why didn't you ever call?" Eleanor looked at her without wavering. "Because I didn't want to interrupt anything. You were busy becoming." Meryl Streep pressed her forehead down against Eleanor's clasped hands. She stayed there for a moment that no camera adequately captured, and no edit could improve. When she lifted her head, her face was not performing a single thing. "You told me I wasn't imagining it." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the microphone caught every word. "I thought about that sentence almost every single day." Eleanor Hartley held her gaze with the calm steadiness of someone who has known something for a very long time. "You weren't." Jimmy Fallon had come down from the desk. He was standing in the aisle 3 feet away, not speaking, not performing concern. He looked like a man who had made a genuine mistake by believing this was going to be a normal segment. He pressed his hand against his mouth. He stood there a long moment, and then he said, quietly, to no one in particular, "Folks, I think we need to let this happen." No one disagreed with him. Questlove stood up slowly from the drum kit. The director did not call for a commercial break. The cameraman closest to the stage did not pull back. The standing ovation started somewhere in the middle of the audience and moved outward like a wave until the entire room was on its feet, and Eleanor Hartley was still sitting, very still, holding Meryl Streep's hands, not looking at any of them at all. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten by the people who need to hear it. After the cameras stopped, Meryl Streep stayed in the building for more than 3 hours. She and Eleanor sat together in a dressing room the production staff quietly cleared out and left to them. Caitlin waited in the hallway. No one knocked. No one needed to. The original reel-to-reel recording, which Caitlin had carried in the same wooden box her mother had kept for 55 years, was placed in Meryl Streep's hands before she left the building that evening. She later said she put it on the shelf in her home office, between two plays. Eleanor Hartley passed away on a Thursday morning in February. 9 weeks after that Tuesday night in November, she died at home, near the shore, with Caitlin beside her. Her memorial service was held in a small church in New Haven on a gray afternoon in late winter. There was a woman sitting in the third row who had not been announced and did not speak. She was there when the service began. She was still there after everyone else had gone. Some conversations take 55 years to finish. Some of them never really do.